The sky stretched endlessly above the Caribbean, a canvas of perfect blue, but inside the cockpits of two Venezuelan SU-30 fighter jets, the air was thick with tension. At 30,000 feet, adrenaline pulsed through every vein, hearts hammering against ribcage as these pilots prepared to push their aircraft, and themselves, to the absolute limit. Today was not a routine patrol. Today was a message, and the message had a single target, the USS George Washington, a floating fortress of American naval power slicing through what Venezuela considered its backyard. Engines roared to life as afterburners lit, pushing the twin-engine flankers into the sky. Pilots adjusted their helmets, checked weapons systems, and flicked switches that would unleash KH-31 missiles capable of reaching Mach 3. One, skimming the ocean's surface, designed to threaten even the largest ships. In their minds, the element of surprise was theirs, the confidence in their machines, the speed, the firepower. They felt invincible. What they did not see was the trap already closing around them. Far below and beyond the horizon, the USS George Washington's strike group moved with silent precision. Nuclear. Powered, capable of operating for decades without refueling, the carrier was more than a ship. It was a fully integrated command system. Around it, Arleigh Burke, class destroyers with the Aegis combat system, scanned hundreds of miles of ocean, tracking every signal, every electronic pulse, every potential threat. As the Venezuelan jets closed the distance, the U.S. Navy did not scramble alert fighters immediately. There was no frantic chatter, no rushed maneuvers. Calm reigned inside the carrier's combat direction center. Operators watched the inbound aircraft like chess players observing pawns that believed themselves kings. Every altitude shift, every acceleration, every heading change was logged, analyzed, and anticipated. The Su-30s were confident, unaware they were already being manipulated by a network of sensors and unseen electronic eyes. Descending from 30,000 feet to mere thousands above the waves, the flankers adopted the classic low-altitude attack profile, attempting to mask themselves against radar clutter. A move once effective in the Cold War had lost its edge decades ago. High above the E-2D Hawk, I hovered like a sentinel, its massive rotating radar dish sweeping the horizon with surgical precision. Nothing escaped its gaze. The carrier strike group, a symphony of naval coordination, had anticipated this approach. Then this happened. The E-18G Growlers, appearing almost ghost-like on radar, activated their LQ-99 electronic jamming pods. Energy pulses erupted, invisible but devastating. The Venezuelan heads-up displays flickered and died. Radar signals became unreliable. Targets disappeared, multiplied, then warped into phantom contacts across their screens. The KH-31 missiles, once a symbol of lethal confidence, were now useless against a foe that could manipulate reality with electrons alone. From the blind spots, stealth fighters appeared. F-35CS and Super Hornets maneuvered into positions where the flankers' sensors could not track them. The Venezuelan pilots glimpsed silhouettes of these American jets just off their wingtips, as if materializing from thin air. Panic replaced pride. Systems designed to give them an edge became treacherous liars. Every instinct screamed for retreat, yet the ocean below offered no sanctuary. Desperation mounted. Radio calls to their command base went unanswered, drowned out by high-pitched interference. Every second in the sky without situational clarity amplified risk exponentially. At supersonic speeds, with their avionics failing, the pilots were no longer aggressors. They were targets in a controlled game of domination. With precision and restraint, the U.S. Navy allowed the encounter to unfold, demonstrating control without kinetic escalation. The flankers, unable to regain orientation, disengaged. One pilot banked sharply south, cutting fire control locks, signaling surrender through motion rather than words. The wingmen followed, afterburners igniting for a desperate dash back to home territory. Behind them, American aircraft maintained minimal escort, enough to ensure the lesson was unforgettable. On board the George Washington, life quickly returned to its routine rhythm. Combat Direction Center operators exhaled, their calm undisturbed by the brief adrenaline surge. Alert fighters returned to holding patterns. The strike group continued its mission without a single missile fired. Victory, absolute and silent, had been achieved. The implications extended far beyond a near miss. Venezuela's display of aggression had exposed weaknesses. Reliance on raw hardware without integrated electronic warfare capabilities, insufficient training, and a lack of real-time intelligence fusion. Modern air combat does not occur solely in visual range. It is fought across the electromagnetic spectrum through data dominance, situational awareness, and precise coordination. The SU-30, formidable on paper, was rendered almost inert by invisible forces its pilots could neither comprehend nor counter. The geopolitical consequences were immediate, though quiet. Caracas had attempted to project strength, seeking to impress domestic and international audiences alike. Instead, it revealed vulnerability. The operation underscored the gap between Russian, exported platforms and the advanced Western systems they face in contemporary theaters. More broadly, it illustrated the subtle power of gray zone warfare, where intimidation, electronic dominance, and psychological pressure often replace conventional firepower. For military analysts, the encounter was a case study in modern deterrence. A few well-placed buttons, a disciplined crew, and a network of sensors transformed potential catastrophe into an instructional demonstration. The pilots returned to base physically unscathed but strategically defeated, their costly aircraft now symbols of limitation rather than might. As for the U.S. Navy, the lesson was reinforcing dominance without provocation. Silent control, layered defense, and technological superiority conveyed a message louder than missiles could. In the Caribbean skies, precision, discipline, and information superiority define victory. Some ships are not meant to be tested, and some mistakes in the theater of modern warfare are the first and last a nation ever makes. The Caribbean waters shimmered under the noon sun, calm and serene, but the air above was charged with the tension of geopolitical brinkmanship. Along the disputed border with Guyana, Venezuelan troops had been massed for weeks, a show of force in a region rich with resources and long-simmering grievances. In response, the United States had deployed its USS George Washington carrier strike group under Operation Southern Seas, a mission designed to reassure allies, secure shipping lanes, and demonstrate unwavering naval dominance. What should have been a routine patrol was about to become a lesson in modern warfare. Inside the cockpits of Su-30 Mk-2 fighter jets, Venezuelan pilots prepared for takeoff. Their orders were clear: intimidate, assert authority, and show the world that Caracas would not back down in the face of American power. These aircraft, Russia's pride in multi-role fighters, were capable of extraordinary maneuvers, armed with Kh-31 anti-ship missiles that could strike at over Mach 3. Confidence ran high. In their minds, they were the hunters, and the USS George Washington was the prey. But beneath the calm surface of the ocean and above it, a far more intricate system lay in wait. The U.S. Navy's carrier strike group was a masterpiece of modern tactical integration. The nuclear-powered carrier, over 60 aircraft aboard, and a suite of Arleigh Burke-class destroyers with the Aegis combat system, combined with E-2D Hawkeye airborne early warning and E-18G Growlers, formed a network that monitored, tracked, and could dominate any threat across hundreds of miles. This was not a confrontation of raw firepower, but of information, precision, and calm command. The Venezuelan jets roared into the sky, banking toward the carrier with determination. Initially, the pilots relied on skill and speed, descending toward the target in classic attack profiles. They expected panic, they expected a reaction, but the Americans remained composed. From the Combat Direction Center aboard the George Washington, operators tracked the aircraft with meticulous attention. Every shift in altitude, every slight turn, every radar ping was logged and analyzed. The Venezuelans had assumed they controlled the narrative, In reality, they were being drawn into one carefully orchestrated by the U.S. Navy. Then this happened. As the SU-30s closed the range, the EA-18G Growlers activated their jamming systems. Avionics screens flickered and froze, lock indicators vanished, radar signals warped, multiplied, and produced false contacts. The KH-31 missiles, once symbols of threat, became meaningless. The pilots found themselves blinded, instruments unreliable, communications fractured. Disorientation replaced confidence, panic creeping into every decision. From unseen angles, F-35C Lightning Roman II fighters maneuvered into the blind spots, maintaining positions where the Venezuelan jets could not detect them. The hunters became the hunted, not through firepower, but through information dominance and strategic patience. Realization hit like a hammer. The American strike group did not need to engage directly. The combination of jamming, sensor superiority, and stealth aircraft created a cage from which there was no safe escape. The SU-30 pilots, overwhelmed by phantom targets and failing avionics, had no choice but to disengage. Banking hard, they turned back toward their airspace, a retreat underscored by the silent authority of the U.S. Navy. Every maneuver had been observed, every response anticipated, every threat neutralized without a single missile being fired. This encounter was more than a tactical victory. It was a masterclass in the evolution of modern warfare. Hardware alone does not guarantee dominance. Raw speed, powerful engines, and high-tech missiles are futile against an opponent who can control the electromagnetic spectrum, integrate real-time data, and exercise disciplined command. The Venezuelan jets were formidable on paper, yet they were rendered ineffective by strategy, coordination, and technology. The geopolitical lesson was clear. Caracas had attempted to project strength, to impress domestic audiences and foreign backers alike, but miscalculation exposed vulnerability. Escalation into kinetic conflict had been avoided only by the restraint and professional control of the U.S. forces. The incident highlighted the dangers of overconfidence, the strategic advantage of electronic warfare, and the subtle power of information superiority. For the pilots returning to base, the reality was sobering. The SU-30s, expensive and capable, had been neutralized not through combat, but through mastery of control and precision. In modern conflicts, victories are increasingly won not with explosive force, but with foresight, technology, and discipline. The region had witnessed a display of dominance, silent yet absolute, a reminder that power is measured not by how loudly it is projected, but by how effectively it can shape the battlefield before shots are fired. Some ships are not meant to be tested, and in the complex chessboard of international relations, the first mistake is often the last. The Caribbean sky was deceptively calm that morning, a perfect expanse of blue stretching to the horizon. But high above the waves, two Venezuelan SU-30 fighter jets roared to life, afterburners flaring as they sliced through the atmosphere. Hearts raced inside the cockpits. Today, they were not on a routine mission. They were on a mission meant to challenge a superpower. Their target, the USS George Washington, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier slicing through what Venezuela considered its backyard. Confidence surged. They had speed, they had missiles, they had audacity. On board the carrier, the scene was quiet, controlled, and meticulously professional. The USS George Washington was more than a ship. It was a floating fortress, carrying over 60 aircraft and tens of thousands of sailors. Around it, Arleigh Burke-class destroyers formed a protective web, all integrated under the Aegis combat system. In the Combat Direction Center, operators monitored every blip in the sky, every signal pulse, every movement of potential threats. What the Venezuelan pilots assumed was surprise and opportunity was in reality a trap of precise orchestration. The jets accelerated, banking toward the carrier with aggressive intent. The pilots descended to low altitude, skimming the waves in classic attack profiles designed to hide them from radar. Their KH-31 missiles were primed, and for a moment it seemed the mission would unfold exactly as they imagined. But then the first sign of disruption hit. The EA-18G Growlers, stealthy and silent until now, activated their ILQ-99 jamming pods, instruments flickered, radar screens filled with noise, lock indicators vanished. The missiles that had once made them feel invincible were now irrelevant. Digital RF memory systems began to work. Phantom contacts appeared across the SU-30's scopes. Suddenly, it was no longer clear what was real and what was manufactured. Targets multiplied, shifted, and disappeared. Every instinct the pilots had relied upon, their situational awareness, their training, their confidence in the aircraft, became unreliable. At supersonic speed, with instruments lying and the radio filled with high-pitched interference, the pilots were isolated, disoriented, and vulnerable. Then, from blind spots the Venezuelan pilots could not perceive, stealth fighters appeared. F-35C Lightning Roman IIs and Super Hornets maneuvered with precision, maintaining positions where they were undetectable to the flankers' failing sensors. The hunters had become the hunted. Every turn, every bank, every aggressive approach was monitored, anticipated, and countered, not through missile fire, but through strategy, patience, and technological superiority. Panic replaced confidence. The SU-30s, once the pride of the Venezuelan Air Force, could no longer distinguish friend from foe on their displays. Every attempt to regain control failed. The cockpit, once a throne of power, had become a cage. The pilots radioed back to base, only to hear digital screeching where guidance and coordination should have been. Alone, blind, and disoriented, they faced the reality of their miscalculation. The retreat was immediate. Banking hard toward their own airspace, they disengaged, afterburners flaring in a desperate dash for safety. The American jets monitored from a distance, ensuring compliance but never firing a shot. The silent victory was complete. Air superiority had been asserted not through explosions or aggression, but through mastery of information, control of the electromagnetic spectrum, and disciplined coordination. On board the George Washington, operations continued as normal. Sailors returned to their routines, alert but calm. The mission had demonstrated a fundamental truth of modern warfare. Raw power is meaningless without integration, data superiority, and strategic patience. The Venezuelan pilots had flown formidable aircraft armed with lethal missiles, yet they were neutralized without a single round being fired. The incident became a lesson in restraint, dominance, and the evolving rules of engagement. In modern conflicts, electronic warfare, stealth, and precise command define outcomes more than speed or firepower. Overconfidence can be catastrophic, and miscalculations in the presence of superior technology carry consequences that extend far beyond the immediate encounter. Some ships are not meant to be tested, and in the skies of the 21st century, the first mistake is often the last.